Enter the interview, Dr. Xoxo. Transcript read by Masochistic Cannibal for Burn This Zine. For people who don't know who are you? Whoa, hey, I'm Zachariah Brown, a 22-year-old art bastard comic gremlin. Also, kawaii fucker, drug doer, word writer, hug giver. I've been doing comics on the internet for about 4 to 5 years now, and I just started a BA in illustration at Mass Art in glorious Boston. Why do you make art? I make art to connect with people. I want to look at things and read things and then make things that speak back to them. Make things that incorporate those things, flip those things inside out, smash those things into other things. I want my art to bring people together, to make people happy, to inspire people, to give people something to do, something to stand on, something to be supported by. Most people give up drawing when they become adults. Why do you keep doing it? That's actually a really interesting question for me. Unlike most artists, I didn't really produce much work or learn any craft when I was young. I was suicidally depressed from middle school to high school and for a bit of my first years of college. I sort of started life in a rut and felt that I was talentless and couldn't achieve anything. So I consumed the art that I loved and slept 14 hours a day and cried a lot. When I got to my first college, I started trying to be a writer, and that first step towards bettering myself so I could make the things I'd look up to got me going in the right direction, but ultimately it wasn't for me. A few false starts and crashes later, I had my big epitome. I was going to draw shit and make comics and keep doing so until I died. So instead of a childish passion that fizzled out when the real world came around, art is the thing that saved my life and continues to move me forward. What is it about comics that appeals to you as an artist? Comics have this wonderful 1-2 punch thing of having a cultural context of accessibility and poppiness on one hand, while on the other being remarkable, all-encompassing. From crappy Sunday funnies to infinite canvas to group projects to complicated gallery setups, comics have a huge range. The other thing comics excel at is telling stories, which is the way I interact with the world, short form or long form, whatever. How has your personal style evolved over time? Back when I started drawing, I had some serious children's outsider art stuff going on. A lot of that is still around because even though I'm trying to work past it, I'm very focused on process. Even today I post comic pages that are poorly scanned, have pencil lines still on them, or bits of eraser, etc., because I think having that connects the reader to what went into making the comic. While I'd like to do more polished stuff, and sometimes the situation requires it, I think intentionally showing process is something a lot of young comic artists today are missing. My style has sort of snowballed a lot of early influences into new ones. Casey Green was my biggest inspiration for years, then Party Dog, and an army of Tumblr artists. Working with watercolors gave me a taste of bright colors and drippy textures, splattery chaos, unfinished forms expressing crude jokes, American post-anime culture, irony, cuteness, darkness, confusion. Some of your comics refer to your drug use. What are some of the positive and negative effects drugs have on the creative process? Whoa, dang, I could write a book about this one. I've been self-medicating for much of my adult life. It's a complicated process. There are times of great mistake-making, desperation, and putting strain on your loved ones. But there are also periods of self-discovery, problem-solving, productivity, and inspiration. When I was younger, I'd do drugs because they fascinated me. Later on, I was doing drugs because I desperately wanted to feel good. These days, I do them to try and make my mind work the way I want, to be productive and sharp, creative, and always moving forward. And sometimes just to party, hail Satan. As far as their direct effect on creative process goes, I think the whole, whoa, this is trippy, this dude must be on drugs perspective is way too present in our culture, and shows a certain level of ignorance towards drug usage. While my old comics had an aspect of glorifying drug use, these days they are only inspired by drug use, like art would be inspired by any other naturally occurring mood or train of thought or concept. If my work refers to disassociation, it takes just as much from my times with DXM, ketamine, MXC, as it does from times when social anxiety put me in a paranoid space, or when I think philosophically about subjectivity. Are there any drugs you would not recommend our readers to take? There are things I can say you should definitely stay away from. Don't do deliriums, don't huff glue, etc. But what drugs someone should and shouldn't try depends on them and their context. Some people should never touch things like opiates and amphetamines. Others can benefit from them when used carefully. It all comes down to doing tons of research, being careful, and making sure you take the time to self-analyze and listen to others. Do you think you would have been as creative if you had never used drugs? Yeah, of course. Drugs don't make someone creative or not creative. They just give you different stuff to pull from.
Creativity is a drive to make stuff and be new. That's a facet of my personality, not a reflection of the fact that one time I ate a powder that made me see sparkly stuff.
Your most recent webcomic is heavily inspired by manga. How do you respond to people who say that manga is formulaic, simplistic, and not as good as Western comics?
Well, manga is generally very formulaic. It's a product of the Japanese factory-style work ethic in regards to its comics. While I can understand why some people wouldn't appreciate that aspect of it on a comic-to-comic basis, I feel that it's easy to appreciate its existence in wider culture. That being said, there is a lot of beauty and technical talent that goes into the mangas of today. The issue is less that manga is all bad or something, it's just that the popular stuff tends to be very samey. And if you aren't grabbed by that, you aren't going to dig for the more creative stuff that would appeal to you. These days, I think the conversation has less to do with the actual state of manga and more to do with the fallout. Anime conventions, young artists making bad rip-off art, anime tropes boiled down and over-exaggerated. A lot of the things that came of Japanese art becoming popular in the West were sort of bad, but in turn, the backlash has created a new sort of culture, and that's probably the focal theme in a lot of the work I do these days. People who grew up in a culture awash with weeaboo Nippon worship, twisting that goofiness into something new.
What are some of the aspects of manga that appeal to you?
Really great crisp art, topics that aren't covered in popular Western comics, over-the-top expressions, blunt sexuality, really time and detail-intensive visuals, all that stuff. But like I've been saying, it's less about the actual comics for me these days, and more about the wider context, tantric manga consumption.
Is your send-up of manga tropes a satire, an appreciation, or both?
I think I've already covered this by now, but both. I feel like people need to be more fluid with their understanding of things, being either cruelly ironic or not. There's a whole lot of in-between.
Defenders of copyright laws sometimes claim that artists would never make art if they didn't get paid for it. How do you respond to that?
Every artist wants to be able to support themselves, but the idea that artists would not make art if it won't is kind of absurd. That being said, making a living as an artist is as hard as it's ever been, and this is an age where monetizing your creativity is just as confusing as it is difficult. I pirate stuff just as much as the next guy, so I support this new wave of pay what you want, donate, micropayment, subscription, whatever systems people are trying to create.
Internet culture is sometimes referred to as collaborative culture or remix culture. Is originality important to you? Is it more important to stand out or to join forces with like-minded people?
I don't really seek to be truly unique, I'd rather build something wonderful. You can't escape your context. While originality is good and important, I think it's better to try to build a community of artists making a huge body of interconnected work than to be a special shining star.
If the internet didn't exist, how would you get your work out to the public?
Oh god, don't even talk about a world with no internet. I honestly have no idea. Through academia? Through publishers? It's hard to imagine the stuff I do getting anywhere in a world without the internet. It's hard to imagine myself existing in a world without the internet. I don't know if I would have survived this long without it.
Why did you agree to answer these questions?
This is all stuff I really think about all the time. Putting it down helps me process it. I'd also hope that someone reading it would take something away from this. Hopefully I've learned enough to impart wisdom on someone else. I think I'm doing okay in life, who knows?